From Connecticut Public Radio in Hartford, this is Audacious. I'm Chion Wolf, and I have always wanted to do a show about pawn shops. I mean, there are so many TV shows about them, like Pawn Stars and Hardcore Pawn, so I thought I could just call up any pawn shop and tell them we'd like to do a show about what they do. And they would be like, oh yeah, that sounds awesome. Thank you so much. You can come by any time. But that was not the case. I called, I emailed, and I visited so many pawn shops, but every time it was either a no thanks, or no response at all. So imagine my delight when I finally got a yes on a hot August day in 2023. My friend Michelle and I were looking for some sweet, sweet air conditioning, so we made a list of 30 places we might be able to go keep cool. And one of them was a pawn shop. So we got in my pickup truck, headed on over to Wethersfield, Connecticut, and pulled up next to a 20-foot tall purple and gold nutcracker propped up next to a sign that read, Pawn Queen. Now, I grew up in Farmington, about 15 minutes away from this shop. I have seen this nutcracker for years, but I've never gone inside the shop. Upon entering, we met two dogs, Sadie and Brody, and the owner of the shop, Sandy Meier, the pawn queen herself. I told her about wanting to do a show about pawn shops. Now that I was talking to her, I loved the idea of women in pawn. And she said, absolutely. Now, in a little bit, you'll meet Lauren Kaminsky. She's a third-generation pawnbroker who's played a big part in rebranding the pawn industry. But first, I revisited Sandy in September of 2023 with a few good microphones and Connecticut Public Visuals journalist Ayanna Brown. You'll also hear the voice of Sandy's dear friend Kathy Rosigo Wickline. Here we are, getting ready to talk about life as the pawn queen. Okay, so maybe a good place to start is say, my name is Sandy Meier. I've been, however long you've been doing this. Yeah, any sort of like introductory anything.
Okay, so just go?
Yeah.
So silly.
I know.
It's harder than it seems.
I know. You're going to warm right up.
All right, so my name is Sandy Meier. I've been a pawnbroker, I believe, for 39 years. A long time.
For those who think they know what a pawn shop is, but they don't actually know what a pawn shop is, what happens here? This is not just a used stuff store. This is not Goodwill. This is not Salvation Army. What is a pawn shop? What is this business? How does it work?
Okay, they originally started 3,000 years ago in China to help peasants get through farm season. So if they had a bad crop year, they would pawn whatever they had to survive.
So when you say pawn whatever they had, so they would bring in maybe something valuable, leather shoes or something.
A lot of things were clothing.
Okay, and so they'd come in, and what would be the transaction? They would say, I need money in exchange for this thing, and then what?
You know, I don't know how it went 3,000 years ago.
How does it go? That's okay. How does it go now?
Well, collateralized loans. So somebody brings me jewelry or tools. That came in this morning, and I give them a percentage of the value of the item, and they have to pay the loan amount plus a fee back on their item.
So someone can come in and say, I've got this decorative gourd, and I really need money. And you look at the gourd and you say, I'm guessing that's worth $20. And then what happens?
Retail, 20 bucks?
I guess that's the question. Like, honestly, talk to me like I'm an alien and I have no idea how to.
Okay, so basically you're getting 10 cents to 30 cents on the dollar.
Of the appraised
of
value.
The retail value.
Retail value of the item.
Yes.
So I've got an iPad. Let's say this was a $1,000 iPad. And I'm like, in a tough spot, here's my iPad. How does this go?
You'd get $200 to $300 on a loan.
And then what would I do to get it back? Like, what's my time frame here?
Initially 2 months.
So if I don't come back within 2 months, the thing is yours.
Correct.
And if I wanted to buy it back, I'd have to buy it at the price you would sell it to anybody.
Not necessarily. I'm lenient.
You're a nice lady.
I am. So I'll never be rich, but I'll get by. Good afternoon, Pawn Queen. No, I'm sorry. I'm going to pass on that. Thank you. Louis Vuitton book bag. I can't tell they're authentic without a receipt. And even then.
Okay, so if someone comes in with a Louis Vuitton bag, I mean, are you a Louis Vuitton expert? Like, how do you know
I'm
if
not. I would need a receipt. And even then, I'd be leery. It's not really my thing. Jewelry is easier, tools. Those are good items. But designer bag, there's so many counterfeits.
What are the most common things that people bring in?
Tools, gold, silver, coins, musical instruments, some electronics.
So in those categories, you have become pretty educated about value.
Oh, yeah. And now with Google, I'm a master.
Any tips about, like, if I come into a handful of jewelry for some reason somehow, and I'm like, I don't know if this is crap or if this is really worth something. Are there giveaways for gold in terms of when you look at it?
Well, you can use a magnet. Gold will not stick to a magnet. So that could kind of help you speed up the process. And then you can bring it to me and I can tell you.
Do most people buy their stuff back?
Not lately. I believe in my heart we are in a recession.
Okay, that's interesting. So what can someone who's run pawn shops for nearly 40 years tell the world about the economic state that we're in?
I feel like it's 1980 all over again, but worse.
How so?
People are broke. They're coming in, they're selling their items, they're taking loans on their items, and I would say 70% are not coming back like they used to. So I think it's just tough to live. Everything's expensive. The cost of rents has gone through the roof. Food.
I think a lot of people, when they think about pawn shops, think that people who run pawn shops are cold and stingy and kind of mean. Why do you think people think that?
I don't know. It's the person that runs the shop. I am the Mother Teresa of pawnbrokers. Like honey.
You do have a honey display in your store. That's true. And sunflowers.
If somebody doesn't
bring in vegetables from your garden.
Oh, hold on. I want to get the peppers out of the car.
Oh, she's so funny. This is true. She'll make big trays of like food and she will feed.
I don't like to see anybody hungry.
She's gone to funerals for customers who have lost spouses and things like that. Like she is so the most like she.
Can we put this on your shirt? Just squeeze it like that. Thank you.
She's amazing. Like, she just really cares for people. She's so generous. I come here with my grandson, I'm like, stop giving him things. You know, she's just, but the thing that always touches my heart about Sandy is that she is so generous to the customers. Because a lot of time lower income people come in here and she'll get to know them. They'll come on a regular basis, sometimes just to visit, sometimes just to talk. She had one guy, unfortunately, just passed away recently. He would come here, older man, just to talk. He was lonely. Every day he'd come here just to talk to her. She'd cook him lunch. She'd cook him dinner. She'd send him home food. She'll make muffins. She picks things from her garden.
She brings
them here. She's touches people's hearts in a way people don't usually.
But I have
pawn shops
I have a
touch
crabby.
people's hearts.
I have a crabby side too.
Yeah, she can be. But I've seen her people come in and try and take advantage of her. Like try to make an attempt to like, oh come on, give me more. She's don't mess with Sandy.
So when people come in and they have something that they want to pawn and you offer a price and they kind of push back on you, I wonder how much their personality affects how generous you can be.
You know what? I like tough customers because I feel I can turn them around.
And she has.
So if you're grumpy, it's because something's going on and you're not happy with yourself.
Okay, so if somebody's being kind of mean and gruff to you, you have some compassion for them?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, that's that saying there. That Mother Teresa saying. Let no one ever come to you without leaving better and happier.
That's Sandy.
Be the living expression of God's kindness. Kindness in your face, kindness in your eyes, and kindness in your smile. I think that's huge.
And Sandy's very childlike in terms of a fun way. Like, she just makes people laugh. It's hard. Like I came in here, I was a little sad. 2 seconds, I'm smiling. She always does that. That's big, kind heart. We've been friends for a billion years.
30 years.
We're a billion years old. We already have our rocking chairs picked out.
Yeah.
But it's nice to see her be so kind to people.
What's an item that somebody brought in and you were like, oh, this is new?
Well, the best thing that I ever got was my last 3 dogs
Wait.
were unwanted. So Coco, who lived to be 17, was a young girl who couldn't take care of him. So I got Coco for $80. And he lived to be 17. Then while I had Coco, I got Jimmy. He came from a puppy mill. I got him at 8 months. He lived to be 15. Then while I had Jimmy, Brody was unwanted. So I got all these unwanted dogs for the last 30 years.
Pawn dogs.
I like that. They got the best life a dog could ever have.
That was Sandy Meier, owner of Pawn Queen in Wethersfield, Connecticut. She was joined by her friend Kathy Resigo-Wickline. When we get back, we're going to take a detour and meet another woman in the pawn industry who's taken her family business to the next level.
I think the stereotype of pawn shops is like, we buy gold and, here's my gun. That's not what our pawn shops are.
Then we'll come back home to the Berlin Turnpike with Sandy Meier, the pawn queen. And hey, does she know any other pawnbrokers who are as compassionate as she is?
Well, I know a lot of that run places like this, so I don't know.
I'm Chion Wolf. This is Audacious. Stay with me.
It ain't stolen, it ain't hot. Someone told me it cost a lot. Man, ain't that the truth? Thought I'd own it my whole life. It never even crossed my mind. Back when it was new. It'd end up in a pawn shop on Charlotte Avenue. Take it to the pawn shop, trade it on in. Take it to the pawn shop like a dusty violin. And set it up on the shelf next to that anniversary clock. And you'll be better off. Take it to the pawn shop, trade it on in.
This is Audacious. I'm Chion Wolf. Lauren Kaminsky has spent decades in the pawn industry. She sifted through treasures at her grandfather's pawn shop as a kid, but when it came time to figure out what she wanted to do with her life, initially she thought she'd work in finance. But her instincts told her to become a third-generation pawnbroker, and she leaned in. Now, every day, Lauren works from dusk till pawn. She's the president of her family business, Easy Pawn Corp., overseeing 16 locations in New York City. But she's also the founder of Buy Gold Girl, selling exclusively through Beauty and Essex. Now, Beauty and Essex is not your grandfather's pawn shop. It's a lavish restaurant/upscale pawn shop with locations in New York, LA, and Las Vegas. You'll hear more about that in a little bit. Now, I asked Lauren to share what it was like growing up in this industry.
Growing up, my dad would go to work and I knew that he worked in jewelry, but I never really understood what he did. I understood the pricing of gold. We would talk about it, at the dinner table, normal family conversation. But it was ingrained in me at a young age that gold is worth something and is valuable and you should be buying gold and selling gold. And then I worked for my dad for a summer and I fell in love with the industry.
What was it you fell in love with?
I really got hooked. I loved every facet of it. I loved the jewelry. I loved going through, okay, this is a business that focuses on making loans to people who need it. But then, if they do default on their loan, then the jewelry becomes the pawn shops. And that's a whole nother business in itself. Then my dad was doing this all on his own. He was deciding, okay, here's this piece of jewelry that someone defaulted on. Now we have to decide, are we going to sell it and invest time and money into it? We have to polish it. We have to price it. We have to know what it is. And then we have to pay someone who's going to sell it for us. Or are we going to just melt it and it becomes, part of our cash flow? We melt something and then that becomes money that we use to then lend out to the next person who needs it. So there are all these different intricacies of the business. And I fell in love with our team. I like waking up in the morning and having problems to solve and fires to put out without even knowing what I'm going into. And I would say that that's my specialty. I mean, even something as silly as I have a customer who, wants a special type of necklace and I have to find it for them. There's so many things.
It sounds like a business that you really have to love in order to be so deeply into it. And I've got to hear some stories. I mean, of all the time that you've been in this, but just like across the counter stories, what have been some people that have, so there's people who come into pawn shops.
Yes.
And then there's objects that come into pawn shops.
Yes.
And sometimes they're very different stories. So will you talk about some people that you've interacted with over the counter that are just super memorable?
Honestly, I think it's not what you think it is. The people that come into our stores are salt of the earth, looking to get by. Sometimes they want to talk about it, and it's a hard story. We say that, sometimes we have to play therapist. Someone needs money, and, this is what they have. And then there are other times that, it's happy, that they have these items, and, So for example, like a story typically is, I have this gold chain and I don't want to have to ask anyone for money in my family. And this is what I have and how much can I get for it? And then when they find out what they can get, a lot of our customers actually ask for less. So for example, if I say you can get $1,000 for this gold chain, our customers who know and understand the business will actually ask for 500 because they're fully planning on coming to take that item back out. So the more that you borrow, the more interest that you have to pay, which is an easy concept to understand. So a lot of our customers know that they're coming back for the piece and they want to owe less. And an interesting statistic is that for our customers, 95% of the time, our customers are coming back for their items.
Well, you talk about some objects that have passed over your counter that you still think about today.
Well, I'm all about jewelry. It's just kind of like my heart and soul. I've been touching jewelry for so long, and they say that, like, you can take all the classes you want on courses. The only way to like really get to know jewelry is by touching it and seeing it every single day. And the experience that I've had, I feel like I could pick up a piece of jewelry and almost, it's like my sixth sense. But yeah, we've had some crazy pieces. I remember when someone came in with like spyware and they had, the microphones and the glasses. And that's just something that sticks out to me as just like, I was working and I just was like, I don't even know where to start right now. but, it's kind of like the TV show, but let me find someone who can understand this and maybe like explain everything to me and then we can work it out. We've had people pawn, a crazy, luxury watch assortment. We've had cars that have been in pawn. You have to kind of think about what's valuable to someone and what might they have. And we don't want to just say, okay, we only focus on jewelry. And that kind of happened about 10 years ago. People started coming out of the woodwork with all these crazy things because of eBay and Craigslist and the TV show Pawn Stars. So it started resonating with them that, I have something of value that's not gold or silver or platinum, and maybe this pawn shop would be interested in that. So we've developed a whole, what we call odds and ends department, where it's not just electronics, it's not just, musical instruments, which also have, longevity. And in our industry, we've always pawned guitars, saxophones and trumpets and such. But really, if it's got value, a pawnbroker is most likely willing to make a loan on it.
Recently, I was at a local pawn shop here in Connecticut on the Berlin Turnpike, and we talked about how in this business, you can really get a feel for how the economy is doing. I'd love to hear about what you think about that. Is the pawn business a good indicator for how the economy is doing?
We do have a pulse on what's happening. If our pawns are up and it's, out of skew from previous seasons or years, it's definitely an indicator. If pawns are down, it's also an indicator. There was a time, over COVID when our numbers were up by so much. So our customers were coming and redeeming their items, which is opposite of, I guess now in hindsight, it makes sense. People weren't spending and they didn't need the money, and they were getting, tax refunds, or they were getting checks, stimulus checks.
Oh, I remember stimulus checks. Oh,
Remember?
Thanks for reminding me.
These were so nice, but not.
No, I'd rather not have them because there wasn't a pandemic. But anyway.
Yeah, exactly. There was just a pandemic going on. So I would say that our numbers could indicate something, and they definitely, could show someone who's looking at the bigger picture. I always say, like, how come no one comes and asks us, like, how are you guys doing? What are your numbers saying? Because we have a lot to do with, maybe the price of gold. If people are constantly selling gold, at what price were they selling it at? At what price did they not care to sell it at? So there are all these things kind of happening at one time in a pawn shop that you would never expect.
And it's funny because the concept of pawnbrokers, it's been around for centuries, right? And people don't really think of them as very innovative. But you took it to kind of another level in terms of a vibe. Will you talk about the projects that you've expanded on, Beauty in Essex?
Thank you. So Beauty in Essex is, if I had a heart that was about work, it's a big piece of my work heart. But Beauty in Essex, it really defined who I am in the industry. My friend had given me a flyer saying, like, the flyer said, restaurant, lounge, pawn shop coming soon to Lower East Side. She was like, hey, Lauren, like, aren't you a pawn shop? Like, you could have a restaurant and a pawn shop. Like, what do you do? And I just was like, no, you cannot. And well, I guess maybe you can, but what is this? I need to speak to them and be a part. I'm a huge foodie. So I just was like, whatever this is, I need to know more. That was like all of my worlds colliding in a postcard. And, being the ambitious, I guess, 21-year-old that I was at the time, I went right down there and I went to that restaurant and I asked the person working in the front. So the restaurant was built already. They had a grand opening, but they still had some like kinks and things that they were working out. And I went into the store, and this was so nervy of me. I feel so bad, but I just was like, what's your interest rate? How much are you guys charging? You can't call yourself a pawn shop. And, you know that we're regulated, and anyone can come in here and say, like, what are you charging? And the girl in the front was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Please, like, let me give you the owner's card. And I was like, yes, that's a good idea. Give me the owner's card. And there are many different versions of the story depending on who you ask. But my dad's version would be that he set up the meeting and he forgot to show up to the meeting with the owners of Beauty in Essex. And I was working at our store in Spanish Harlem at the time at the counter. And these two men walk in, and they're more interested in the guitars than anything else, which is very strange. Like, I mean, most people come in, we call ourselves the Cheers pawn shop of Spanish Harlem. Like, people come in and they say hi, and it's exactly like, we know a lot of people. And the fact that they were just like so enamored by the guitars, I was like, okay, they're not from around here. Otherwise, they'd walk past these guitars every single day. Sorry, this is a bit of a long story, but it's important. It's important to me. Anyway, they come in. I find out that they're the owners of Beauty in Essex, and, they're interested in making their pawn shop facade, somewhat of the real deal and as authentic as possible. And I'm so excited about this. This is like music to my ears that they're willing to work with me. I'm like, this young girl and I'm going to make this work, whatever they need. So we had ended the meeting pretty much shaking hands, saying that, I'm going to set up a jewelry store as their front, and I can have knickknacks and things that are like cool pawn shop, not like consignment store, thrifty store pawn shop, but like cool rock and roll pawn shop is, I think, what we were going for. And that was 13 years ago. And, the rest is history. We went from, that one store in New York to then they took me with them to their opening in Las Vegas. So now we have our retail store at the front of their Beauty and Essex restaurant in Las Vegas and also Los Angeles.
So if I were to go to the Vegas location, because I haven't been to Vegas yet, and they have that big sphere thing.
I was just there last week.
Cool.
It's
you were?
Cool.
Is it as cool? Did you get woozy at all?
It takes a lot to get me woozy, so no, but it was fun.
So I haven't been to Vegas yet. So when I go to Vegas to check out the sphere, I also want to check out Beauty and Essex. So will you walk me through when I come to the front of Beauty and Essex, what do I see and what do I experience as I walk in and through?
It's just so Vegas. We really go overboard at this location. We have vintage Rolexes. We sell artwork. We sell, the guitars are for sale at all of the locations, but we sell like crazy guitars there that are, have leather paneling. So that store is just so much fun because everyone's just so excited and happy in Vegas. And it's like at a different level.
So are the objects in Beauty and Essex sourced from Easy Pawn stores?
Yes. So originally, in order to keep that authenticity of, we're a cool pawn shop, not a regular pawn shop, I sourced a lot of our things from Easy Pawn. Since we've grown, it's been hard to just do that. And I now source from, I was at an art show in Seattle and found this amazing artist who makes art out of records. And, again, it totally fits the vibe there. So I love sourcing things that you would never just come across. We're not selling things that you can just, find at your own local stores. We really try to make it specific and special.
It sounds like you have a really cool freaking life. Do you ever like pull your camera back and look at what you do for a living and think, this is really cool?
I try. My kids don't think I'm that cool though. Yeah.
Let them listen to this conversation. I'd like to hear about being a woman in this industry because I know there are women in this industry, but I feel like people don't think pawn shop women.
Nope.
What's your reaction to that?
I think as pawn shops started getting more involved in luxury, it just became a space that I think a woman is more comfortable in. Is that if we're like more focused on jewelry and handbags, that's like in our DNA. So, I mean, whereas I think the stereotype of pawn shops is like, we buy gold and, here's my gun. That's not what our pawn shops are. And so I think that that's where it shifted a lot is like, now that we're, there's social media, there's Facebook, like you're able to show your presence more, visually. So if you're able to show that softer side, not that men aren't soft, but I just think that like if you're able to show a beautiful pawn shop, wouldn't that appeal to you a lot more than a pawn shop that doesn't have social media, that seems unapproachable, that might have like bars on the windows and, bulletproof glass? That's just not where I would want to be. And I think that social media has helped me a lot in saying like, look, I run these stores. I wouldn't be working with my family or with my dad if they were unapproachable. And that was a big hurdle for us. Just a quick side story is that we're opening up a store in New York in Sunnyside, and there was a lot of pushback in the neighborhood. And I think they were very quick to judge my dad as like your stereotypical pawnbroker. Granted, he like drives motorcycle and like has the goatee and like all this stuff, but like I pretty much went to them and I said, he's my dad and this is my future. And I wouldn't be here if it was unsafe in any way, or if it was sketchy, or all of those words that people use to describe, the stereotype. I wouldn't build a pawn shop that I wouldn't want in my community. So this store is going to look more like a high-end jewelry store. And we are going to have the best in vintage handbag selections. And I'm going to put my friendliest, nicest pawnbroker in there because I know how important it is to you. And I kind of had to say, like, look, it's okay to be a woman in pawn. It's cool now. We can do things that would appeal to us and make it a business that fits whatever you want it to be. If you don't like handbags, don't buy handbags at your pawn shop. But there are so many things that can interest someone. If you're more interested in art, again, there's pawn shops that buy art, pawn art, as long as it has value.
And to your point, if women are in this industry and they're bringing their style, their flair, their interest in it being a safe space, for lack of a better term, for people to come in, then the presence, I feel like what I'm hearing you saying is that the presence of women may advance the entire pawn industry as a whole.
It's a bold statement, but I'm not going to disagree. And I know some badass pawnbrokers that are women who I truly love and admire personally and in this business.
So when you think about your grandfather, Martin Kaminsky, who founded the business after World War II, if you could give him a snapshot of what you're doing today, what do you think he'd say?
I think my grandpa would fall off his chair. But he also, I didn't know him for that long. He passed away, I think I was about 10. So I didn't get to know him as a pawnbroker. I knew him as my grandpa. And he loved, he was such a good grandpa. He would take us to the ballet and he would do all these things with us. We would go skiing. So I think he would actually love the idea of it if I were able to say look at what I did and it worked. So it just, I don't know. I think I would love to have that conversation with him if I could, and just to see his reaction.
Lauren Kaminsky, thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you. This was so fun.
We'll have a link to Lauren's work at Easy Pawn Corp, Beauty in Essex, and Buy Gold Girl at ctpublic.org/audacious. After the break, we go back to the Pawn Queen for her reflections on the emotional impact of selling a family heirloom.
It's only stuff. It's not your grandmother. Your grandmother lives in here, not in that ring.
I'm Chion Wolf. This is Audacious. Stay tuned.
Perfectly intact. Here I am, a pawn shop queen, ball gown ripped right down the seam, a precious diamond losing its gleam. Pretty picture in a
This is Audacious. I'm Chion Wolf. For this episode about women in the pawn industry, we are heading back to a pawn shop in Wethersfield, Connecticut, and talking with Sandy Meier, the owner of Pawn Queen. She's been in the industry for nearly 40 years, and she's joined by her friend Kathy Resigo-Wickline. Let's get back to our conversation, which was recorded in September of 2023.
Here's what I think of when I think of a pawn shop. I think of someone coming in with their dead grandma's ring, and they're so desperate. This is the end of their rope. And here they are with this really meaningful ring. This hurts to have to do this. They don't know if they're going to be able to buy it back. What is that experience like for you? You're clearly such a kind, compassionate person, an empathetic person. What is that experience like for you?
It's only stuff. It's not your grandmother. Your grandmother lives in here, not in that ring. I'm gonna cry.
She told me this. My mother just passed as well, and I was trying to get things up, and she said, "Kathy, it don't matter. Just get rid of it. You don't need it.
You need the money. It gets you through a
Gets you
hard
through
time.
things, yeah."
Yeah, here I come. Kathy, can you go help?
Not at all. Please don't hold back. Thank
Kathy
you.
will help you, darling.
Oh, you're assistant for the day, huh? I like this.
I always put my friends and customers to work. They chip in.
I think that I think that's an important point to make, that maybe there are people who are thinking about pawning something that matters to them and they can't bring themselves to. That's good advice.
It's just stop. Let it go. I told you make me cry. You've got that way.
Okay. So everything that is in this shop on display is stuff that has gone beyond the limit of being bought back by the person.
Or was just sold outright.
So if I wanted to sell this iPad, I'm not coming back for it. How much would I get for it?
Probably $300.
So maybe a little more than if I wasn't coming back.
Potentially, yes. Depending how hot the item is, how fast it sells.
How often do you get stuff from people who've died that you know of?
Quite often. I run estate sales too as my little side hustle. So unfortunately, that's when people have passed. So I get a lot of dead people stuff.
Now, do you ever get an item and you feel like there's something spooky? There's something spooky with this item. Do you have access
I've
to those
never
feelings?
felt that way.
Okay.
I feel like I'm a strong believer in my faith and in God, and I believe that no evil energy can touch me.
What is the object in this shop that has been here the longest?
Me.
I'm going to tell you, but I'm looking around like.
Definitely me.
What would be a dream object someone would bring in and they're like, I don't want to buy this back, I just want to sell it? What would be something that would make you personally very excited to buy off someone?
I'm not attached to things. I really am not. Like, there's not a fancy car I want.
You always give everything
I'm
away.
going to be a farmer. When I'm done with this, I'm going to raise bees and chickens.
She's invited customers to her house for dinner.
Oh, yeah.
And they'll come over. And I'm sitting there, I'm helping her in the kitchen, whatever. She's giving away her stuff. I'm like, what?
Oh, yeah.
She just gives away furniture,
like random
pictures,
things.
Bibles, different things.
But I pick up all these treasures and then I pass them on.
Has there ever been a time where someone brought something in to sell and you were pretty confident you knew its value? Like a piece of jewelry.
Yeah.
And then later you realized, crap, that was not worth as much as I thought it was. And they got a really good deal out of it, but you kind of screwed yourself.
That happened not too long ago.
What happened?
A person that I knew from childhood was getting divorced, and I felt bad for her, so I gave her too much money for her item.
Did you know you were giving her too much
Yes.
money at the time?
I did.
Did she know you were giving her too much money?
I think she did. And I said, no, I'm not.
It's fine.
But I felt
You did it to me last weekend.
I wanted to help
Last
her.
weekend, when I was sad, I came here with Jaden.
Yeah.
And I told you I did the air conditioner, and you said, you only charged me for like 2 things, and I went home with like 10.
Well, that's how I roll.
I know, that's my point.
So
Happens
I'll
often.
never be rich.
Hope you don't regret it, but
Rich in spirit. Rich in spirit.
There's a giant nutcracker outside.
Yes. I used to have two.
Wait, tell the whole story about that
Those
nutcracker.
used to be up the street at the candle shop, and they were in disrepair, ready for the fire pit. So then the story is the wife got sick and the place got run down. So I approached them to buy the nutcrackers and bring them back to life. Well, they were in really bad shape. So one of my customers restored them, but Kathy's sons were part of getting them back here.
It's quite the circus.
And one of the heads fell off onto the Berlin Turnpike. So but we resurrected them. And then recently, about maybe 2 or 3 months ago, a customer asked to buy it. But I had another one in the back corner, so I sold it to them.
I wonder what happened to your other one.
Those nutcrackers have been in existence for at least 50 years.
Or more.
Will you tell me about the name of this place, Pawn Queen?
Haha, she's the queen.
Oh. I started calling myself Pawn Queen 20 years ago.
So when people think about folks who run pawn shops, they don't typically picture women.
No, it's basically a male-run industry.
Why do you think that is?
Because I think it could be somewhat of a scary business, intimidating. And men are supposedly tougher than women, but that's not the
true. Case in Sandy.
Like Mighty Mouse.
Sandy is like a guy with a personality at times. Yes.
Tough cookie.
She
that
scares
came
me.
from my mother. She was tough.
What was it about your mom that you think empowered you to be someone that could get into a business like this?
Because my mother wasn't afraid of anything.
Nothing.
She was tough. Divorced when I was 5 turning 6. She had to raise 3 kids. Immigrant, no education, 4th grade, worked in sweatshops. I had a good teacher.
She was funny.
Tough.
I want to ask, how good of a living can you make doing this kind of work? So how much of a living can you make? Do you make an income where you can sail to Bali on your yacht?
I've been to Bali.
Yeah, that's where it was.
And I'm not rich. I've been all over the world. I used to do a lot of mountain biking. I'm just a saver. You can make a decent living.
But she doesn't spend a lot of money because you never buy her anything
simple.
new. You always buy her something
used.
So this business is good to you.
It's been very good to me.
If someone hears our conversation and they think, oh, really? Maybe I can get started in this industry.
It's got to be in your bones. For me, it was meant to be like people and use stuff.
What do you have to have in your disposition, in your personality, in your negotiating mind? Like, what are some words that come to mind in terms of the spirit of someone who runs a place like this?
Well, I know a lot of that run places like this, so I don't know. I mean, a lot of people are that person you spoke about earlier, that grimy, heartless, take your stuff, make a few bucks.
Yeah, smoking cigarettes,
make a lot of money.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, there are people like that.
But Sandy runs an honest pawn shop, and I think she's one that she's up and up on everything, and she's very honest. She'll tell someone on the phone, "I'm sorry, I don't take that," and people get disappointed. But why not? You know, because I'm not in the market for that. Like the Louis Vuitton bag, or if I bought a Prada bag in, and Sandy is wise enough to make. She's very common sensible.
When you do have to disappoint somebody, you're not going to give them the price they're looking for, or you're not going to take it at all. That doesn't feel good to anybody with empathy. You want to say yes to people. How have you learned to say no, or to say this is all I can offer without that pang in your heart?
It depends on the person. So I read the person.
She's overgiven money before the things because she's cared.
Nasty. I'm sorry, I can't take it. I'm very direct.
Your heart doesn't hurt.
No, because they're nasty. So I don't feel bad. If they touch me, I will give them a little something.
You mean emotionally, not physically.
Monetarily.
If they touch you emotionally, not physically.
Oh yeah, right.
Just
touch my heart.
They touch my heart. I mean,
You feel connected.
I had a lady who lost her husband that moved up, and I'll never forget this story, from New Mexico. She had 4 young children and a big SUV, and she pawned some really cool, expensive items. So I gave her a few dollars for her items, and I met her children, and I'm gonna cry. I looked at her little daughter, and she reminded me of myself at her age. Like a mother with no husband, like a heart. So I gave her $300 to take the kids out for Easter.
I remember that.
I saw me and that kid like crazy. That touched me.
Sandy's mother worked hard, and Sandy used to have to pretty much raise her brothers. So Sandy had a little
My
tough
little brother I
little brother.
raised.
Yeah.
Who's gone.
Yeah, and she loves kids. She just loves kids. And so she's had a tough time growing up. That's why she's so tough.
I'd like to get on their level. They make me forget the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And I bet that sort of attention and love and respect that they get from you helps them form into the kind of
They
people
think I'm one of them,
Yes.
which is awesome. But the kid, I just have always gravitated towards children. I babysat, God, forever.
So how long do you think you'll be doing this for?
Oh, geez. At least 6 more years. I'll be 65. At least. And then I'll become farmer with Kathy.
Yes.
We're going to move down south.
Yes. Children and dogs on the property. That's it.
You know what I would love to do, but it's hard? An orphanage.
Yeah, she's been wanting to do that forever.
Did you ever see Cider House Rules? Oh, I would love to have that house with the kids, teach them how to garden,
Like an Annie story.
all
kinda
the
like.
animals, and live happily ever after.
So we said,
And
talk
if they
about-
want to leave, they grow up, they leave. If they want to stay, they stay.
And if they want to start a pawn shop, you'll have some good advice.
That's right.
When you think about your final breaths, if you get to be aware that they are your final breaths,
Okay.
and you look back on your life, and you have these flashes of really meaningful moments of things that happen here in this shop, things that happen because you run this shop, is there anything you think, I wish I had done that differently?
I don't think so. I really don't. No regrets.
Can't ask for better than that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm doing what I feel is the right thing to do every day. And I get to bring my dogs to work. Woo! Where's your belly?
Let's see your
Show Kay on your belly.
I want to see your belly.
Where's the
That's a
belly?
nice belly.
Where's the belly?
I got the pawn shop blues. Pawn shop blues. I got the pawn shop blues. Pawn shop blues. All the way down to my Gucci shoes. Pawn shop blues. I got the pawn shop blues. Pawn shop blues. I need some bling, bling, bling.
That was Sandy Meier, the owner of Pawn Queen on the Berlin Turnpike in Wethersfield, Connecticut. She was joined by her friend Kathy Resigo Wickline and her sweet pups, Sadie and Brody. Audacious is always lovingly produced by Jessica Severin DeMartinez, Khalil Rahman, Meg Fitzgerald, Meg Dalton, and Katie Tolarski at Connecticut Public Radio in Hartford. If you like this episode where I speak with people in real life out in the world, listen back to my visit to the John Zaffis Paranormal Museum, or the one where I got a past life regression, and I went to a nudist resort, but not at the same time. Oh, and there was one where I tried auctioneering for the first time. There was another one where I learned how to dumpster dive. And there was that one time I reported live from a 25-person strong cuddle party. There was also a beautiful episode where a Connecticut woman invited me into her home to show me around as she talked about her struggles with hoarding disorder. You can explore all of these amazing conversations and see photos from my time with Sandy at Pawn Queen by Ayanna Brown at ctpublic.org/audacious. And please do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Stay in touch with me on the socials at Chion Wolf, and you can always send an email to audacious@ctpublic.org. Thanks for listening.